The bread was already in the oven when I picked up my coat. That detail matters. I want you to know that. The bread was already in the oven, the house smelled like yeast and wood smoke, and I had been standing at the kitchen window for 11 minutes, watching the road. I know it was 11 minutes because I counted. I do that. I count things when I don't know what else to do with my hands. The road was empty. It was a Tuesday in March, the ground still half frozen, and the light outside was the color of old dishwater. I had somewhere I needed to be. My husband was not home. He had not said I could leave. I left anyway. I'm Ruth. This channel is called Ruth the Amish Girl. I grew up Old Order, Lancaster County, the kind of community where the bishop's name was spoken in the same breath as God's, and most of the time, it was hard to tell the difference. I was 26 when I left. If you're new here, subscribe. Hit the like button if this is the kind of story you want more of. And tell me in the comments, have you ever followed a rule you didn't believe in just because leaving it felt too big? Because I did that for years. And then one Tuesday, I didn't. The rule wasn't written anywhere. That's the thing people sometimes find hard to believe. There was no document, no printed list. It lived in the way women talked to each other, in what got said when a wife came somewhere alone, in the look the deacon's wife would give across a room. A woman didn't go out alone, not to town, not to the neighbors, not for long. You went with your husband, or you stayed home. If you needed something and he wasn't there, you waited. That was the shape of it. My husband Jacob was a good man. I want to say that plainly. He never hit me. He wasn't cruel. He worked hard. He came home tired. He prayed before every meal, and he meant it. But there was a version of my life that he was allowed to have opinions about, and that version was all of it. Where I went, when I went, who I spoke to, and for how long. That was just marriage, where we were from. Nobody called it control. It didn't have a name. My friend Miriam was the one who said the thing I still think about. We were at her kitchen table the week before, shelling beans, her youngest asleep in the back room, and I was telling her about my sister in the next county over. My sister who was sick, who had asked me to come, who needed me. And I was explaining all the reasons I couldn't just go. The timing, Jacob's schedule, what it would look like. Miriam put down her bowl. She didn't look at me. She looked at her hands. She said, "Ruth, a woman who can't walk out her own door isn't being kept safe. She's being kept." That was all. She picked up her bowl again and kept shelling. I didn't say anything back. I agreed with her completely, and I sat there like I didn't. That was 7 days before the Tuesday. My sister's name is Hannah. She was having a hard time, something with her chest, something the English doctor had said needed attention, and she'd sent word through a neighbor asking if I could come. It wasn't an emergency, but it wasn't nothing either. I asked Jacob the night she sent word. He said he wasn't sure about the timing. He'd let me know. 3 days went by, and he hadn't said anything more. I didn't ask again. That's its own kind of training, not asking twice. You learn it so gradually, you don't notice you've learned it. On Tuesday morning, Jacob went to help a neighbor with fencing. He'd be gone until evening. I stood at that window for 11 minutes. Then I went to the oven, I turned the heat down just slightly so the bread wouldn't burn, and I put on my coat and my black bonnet, and I walked out to the road, and I hired a driver. I want to tell you that I felt brave. I didn't. My hands were pressed flat against my apron the whole ride, and I barely spoke. The driver, an Englishwoman named Patty, who did this run twice a week, she looked at me in the rearview mirror once and didn't ask any questions. I think she'd had other women in that seat. I think she knew. Hannah was fine. She was going to be fine. We sat together for 2 hours. I helped her sort some things. We talked about our mother. We ate cold chicken and bread someone had left on her porch. It was ordinary. That's the part that's hard to explain. Nothing happened that afternoon that would make sense as a reason to blow up your life. It was just an afternoon with my sister. But on the ride home, Somewhere on that flat gray road, I understood something. I had just done, without permission, a thing I had every right to do. I had gone to my sick sister. And the fact that I'd had to sneak, the fact that my hands had been shaking, that I'd counted 11 minutes at a window before allowing myself to walk to the end of my own driveway. That was not devotion. That wasn't scripture. That was something else entirely. Jacob was home before I was. He was standing in the kitchen when I came in. The bread was done and sitting on the rack, and he'd sliced himself a piece. He looked at me. "Where were you?" Not a question, a measurement. I told him I had gone to Hannah. I told him she'd asked me to come. I said it plainly, standing there in my coat, and I watched his face work through something. He said, "You should have waited for me to say." And I said, "I know." But something in me said it differently than it would have the week before. Something in me said it like a door being closed very quietly from the inside. I didn't leave that night. I want to be honest about that because I think sometimes these stories get told as if there's a single moment, a confrontation, a packed bag, a dramatic exit. Mine was slower than that. 3 more months passed. The bishop did come, eventually, because Jacob had spoken to someone, and the bishop sat in our kitchen and talked about wives and submission and God's order, and I listened and I nodded, and inside I was already somewhere else. I left in June with a bag and Patty's phone number, which I had kept. I still think about the bread, how I turned it down just a little before I walked out, how some part of me, even in the middle of leaving, was making sure it wouldn't burn. I don't know what that means. I'm not sure it means anything, but I've never been able to shake the image. Me, in my coat and bonnet, adjusting the oven temperature in the house I was about to stop living in. Maybe that's just who I am. Maybe I was saying goodbye to something I loved even as I walked away from what was using it against me. I'm still working out the difference between those two things. If you are too, leave me a comment. Tell me what you think that bread was about. And if you're new here, subscribe. There are more stories, and I'll keep telling them as honestly as I know how.